Let me reframe how you think about data protection for a moment. So far, we've focused a lot on your duties as an organization. But there's another side to this coin, the rights of the individual. These rules don't just impose burdens, they grant people real, enforceable powers over their own data. In this chapter, we'll explore those rights and how grievances get resolved. We'll start with an overview of the rights granted to data principals, then dig into the right to access and correction, the right to erasure with its 90-day window, and the interesting right to nominate someone to act on your behalf. We'll examine grievance redressal mechanisms, the channels people use when something goes wrong. We'll walk through how to handle a data principal request from start to finish and talk about automating rights at scale, because doing this manually for thousands of requests quickly becomes unworkable. Then we'll process a data subject access request together as a worked example and finish with a checklist. Understanding rights isn't just about compliance, it's about understanding the people your data practices serve. So let's see this from their side of the table. Let's begin. Let's open by surveying the rights that the framework hands to data principals, because these rights are the counterweight to all the organizational duties we've discussed. Think of it as a balance. Organizations have obligations and individuals have powers, and together they create accountability. So what are these rights broadly? Data principals have the right to access information about their data, the right to correction of inaccurate data and erasure of data that's no longer needed, the right to nominate someone to exercise their rights in certain circumstances, and the right to grievance redressal when they have a complaint. Let me give you the big picture way to think about this. Imagine you've handed your belongings to a storage company. You'd naturally expect certain rights: to know what they're holding, to fix any mistakes in their records, to get your things back or have them disposed of properly, and to complain if they mishandle anything. Data principal rights work in much the same spirit. Your data is yours, and these rights let you maintain some control over it even after you've shared it. Here's why this matters for you as an organization. Every one of these rights translates into something you must be able to deliver. If someone has a right to access their data, you need a way to actually provide it. Rights aren't just nice principles, they're operational requirements. As we go through each one, keep asking yourself, could my organization actually honor this request today? If the answer is no, you found something to build. Let's look at each right in turn. Let's start with two foundational rights that go hand in hand: the right to access and the right to correction. Begin with access. Data principals have the right to know what personal data of theirs you hold and how you're processing it. In plain terms, a person can come to you and say, "Show me what you've got on me and tell me what you're doing with it." Why does this right matter so much? Because you can't exercise any control over something you can't see. Access is the gateway right. It's what lets people understand their situation well enough to take further action. Think of it like requesting your own bank statement. You have a right to see your transactions because it's your money and your account. Your data deserves the same transparency. Now, correction. Once people can see their data, they need a way to fix what's wrong. The right to correction lets a data principal request that inaccurate or incomplete data be put right. Imagine a credit record with a wrong address or a mistaken default that isn't yours. That error could cause real harm affecting loans or services. The right to correction exists precisely so people aren't trapped by mistakes in their records. Let me give you a real-world scenario. Someone notices a company has their old phone number and a misspelled name, leading to missed communications. They have the right to ask for that to be corrected, and you have the duty to act on it. Here's the instructor's takeaway. Build a clear, accessible way for people to both see their data and request fixes. Access and correction together let individuals keep their own records honest and accurate. Let's look at a powerful right that connects back to our retention discussion: the right to erasure, along with an important timing concept, the 90-day window. The right to erasure means a data principal can request that you delete their personal data, and where there's no longer a valid reason to keep it, you're expected to comply. This is the individual's lever to say, "I want you to delete my data," complementing the retention obligations we covered, where you delete data proactively. Here, the individual initiates it. Now let's talk about that 90-day window, which is a specific and interesting concept in the framework. It relates to data principal inactivity. Broadly, the idea is that after a defined period, in the region of 90 days, of a data principal being unreachable or inactive in exercising contact, certain processes around their data and account can be triggered. Let me make sure this lands clearly. Think about an account where the person has gone completely silent and unreachable for an extended stretch. The framework contemplates timeframes, with 90 days being a notable marker, after which the organization may need to take certain steps regarding that dormant relationship. Here's a relatable way to picture it. Think of a service trying to reach you about your account, getting no response for about 3 months, and then moving to the next stage of its process. Here's the instructor's tip. Understand both sides of erasure, the individual's right to request deletion and the timing concepts like the 90-day window that govern how dormant or unreachable relationships are handled. Build processes that honor erasure requests promptly and that account for these defined timeframes so dormant data doesn't just sit indefinitely. Let's explore a right that's genuinely distinctive and thoughtful: the right to nominate. This one doesn't get as much attention as the others, but it reflects real care in the framework's design. Here's what it means. A data principal has the right to nominate another individual to exercise their rights on their behalf, particularly in the event of death or incapacity. So a person can designate someone, a trusted family member perhaps, to step in and manage their data rights if they're no longer able to themselves. Why does this matter? Let's think about a situation most people don't like to consider but should. What happens to your digital life and your data when you pass away or become seriously incapacitated? Without a mechanism like nomination, your data could sit in limbo, with no one empowered to access, manage, or close it. Think about all the accounts, information, and digital traces a person accumulates. The right to nominate gives people a way to plan for that, to ensure someone they trust can handle their data affairs. Here's a real-world parallel. It's a bit like naming a beneficiary or assigning someone power of attorney. You're deciding in advance who should act for you when you can't. The right to nominate brings that sensible, humane concept into the world of personal data. Here's the instructor's takeaway for organizations. You need to be able to accommodate nominations, to recognize when someone has been validly nominated, and to allow them to exercise the data principal's rights appropriately. It's a less common request, but when it arises, often in difficult circumstances, handling it with care and correctness genuinely matters to the people involved. Let's talk about what happens when something goes wrong from the individual's perspective: grievance redressal. Because rights mean little if there's no way to complain when they are not respected. Here's the principle. Data principals must have an accessible way to raise grievances, and organizations must have a mechanism to receive and address them. People need somewhere to turn when they feel their data has been mishandled or their rights ignored. Let me explain the structure. The expectation is that you, as a data fiduciary, provide a readily available means for people to lodge complaints with you directly, and that you have a process to respond to them. This often involves a designated point of contact, a way for grievances to actually reach someone who can act. And importantly, if the individual isn't satisfied with how you handle it, there's a path to escalate further, ultimately to the Data Protection Board. So there's a tiered structure. First, raise it with the organization. If that doesn't resolve things, escalate to the regulator. Think of it like a complaint process at a company. You first try customer service. If they don't help, you escalate to a manager, and beyond that, perhaps to an external ombudsman. Grievance redressal in the data world follows a similar logic: internal first, then external oversight. Here's the instructor's tip. Don't treat grievances as annoyances to be deflected. A well-handled grievance is a chance to fix a problem and retain trust, while a deflected one is likely to escalate to the board and become a much bigger issue. Build a genuine, accessible grievance mechanism, and actually resolve what comes through it. Let's get practical and walk through how you actually handle a data principal request from beginning to end. Because knowing the rights exist is one thing, but operationalizing them is another. Picture the full journey of a request. It starts when a data principal reaches out, maybe to access their data, correct something, or request erasure. The first step is receiving the request through a channel you've made available and recognizable. If people can't even find how to make a request, everything else falls apart. Next comes verifying identity. This is crucial. Before you act on a request, you need reasonable confidence that the person making it is actually who they claim to be. Imagine acting on an erasure request from someone impersonating your customer. You'd be deleting the real person's data on a fraudster's say-so. So, verification protects everyone. Then you assess and fulfill the request. What are they asking for? Is it valid? Do any limits or exceptions apply? You gather the data for an access request, make the fix for a correction, or carry out the deletion for an erasure, remembering to propagate across processors as we discussed. Throughout, you communicate, acknowledging the request, keeping the person informed, and confirming when it's done, ideally within reasonable, defined timeframes. Here's the instructor's takeaway. Map this end-to-end flow for your organization. Receive, verify, assess, fulfill, communicate. When you have a clear, repeatable process, handling rights requests becomes routine rather than chaotic. And when a request arrives, you'll respond with competence instead of scrambling. Let's confront a practical reality that hits growing organizations hard. Handling rights requests manually works fine when you get a handful. But what happens when you're getting hundreds or thousands? That's where automation becomes essential. Here's the problem. Imagine every access request requiring someone to manually hunt through a dozen systems to find all of a person's data. Every erasure request requiring manual deletion across databases and processors. Every correction handled by hand. At small volumes, manageable. At scale, it collapses, requests pile up, deadlines get missed, errors creep in. Think about the difference between a small shop handling a few orders a day by hand versus a large warehouse processing thousands. The warehouse can't operate manually, it needs systems. Rights at scale are the same. So the solution is to build automation into how you handle rights. Systems that can locate a person's data across your environment quickly, that can execute deletions consistently, including signaling processors, that can track each request and its deadline, and that give individual self-service options where appropriate. Picture a well-designed setup where a verified user can log in, see their data, request corrections, and initiate erasure, with much of it handled automatically behind the scenes. That's the mature state. Here's the instructor's takeaway. As your data footprint grows, treat rights fulfillment as a system to engineer, not a task to staff endlessly. Automation isn't just about efficiency, it's about reliably meeting your obligations and timeframes when volume climbs. Build for scale before the volume forces your hand, and rights requests become a smooth, dependable process rather than a mounting backlog. Let's solidify everything by working through a data subject access request, often called a DSAR, from start to finish. Picture a customer named Arjun who emails a company called Streamflix asking, "Please tell me what personal data you hold about me and how you use it." Let's process it together. Step 1. Receiving. Streamflix has a recognizable channel, and Arjun's request lands with the right team rather than vanishing into a general inbox. Step 2. Verifying identity. Before revealing any data, Streamflix confirms Arjun is genuinely Arjun, perhaps by verifying he controls the account in question. They don't want to hand his data to an imposter. Step 3. Gathering. Streamflix locates Arjun's personal data across its systems, his account details, viewing history, payment information, and any data held by processors on its behalf. This is where good data mapping and automation pay off. Step 4. Compiling the response. They put together a clear explanation of what data they hold and how it's used, in language Arjun can understand, not a confusing data dump. Step 5. delivering within a reasonable time frame, and being ready to handle any follow-up, like a correction or erasure request that might result. Notice how the end-to-end process we discussed plays out concretely here. Now here's your exercise. Imagine a DSAR arriving at your organization tomorrow. Walk it through these steps. Could you find all the person's data? Could you verify them? Could you respond clearly and on time? If any step gives you pause, that's precisely where to strengthen your process before a real request tests it. Let's wrap up this chapter with a checklist covering data principal rights and grievance redressal. Start with awareness and access. Do you provide a clear, findable channel through which people can exercise their rights? And do they know it exists? Now go right by right. Can you fulfill a request for access, actually showing someone what data you hold and how you use it? Can you handle corrections, fixing inaccurate or incomplete data? Can you carry out erasure requests, deleting data where there's no valid reason to keep it, and propagating that across processors? Can you accommodate a valid nomination, allowing a nominated person to act in cases like death or incapacity? Now verification. Before acting on requests, do you reasonably confirm the identity of the requester so you don't act on impersonators? Check your grievance mechanism. Do you offer an accessible way to raise complaints with a real process to address them? And do people know they can escalate to the data protection board? Now timing and scale. Can you handle requests within reasonable, defined timeframes? And have you built automation so you can cope as volume grows? And finally, the perspective check. If you were the data principal, would you feel your rights were genuinely respected and easy to exercise? Run this checklist to make sure rights aren't just theoretical promises, but real, deliverable capabilities. Make sure to subscribe to our channel so you're notified when the next chapter goes live, where we tackle Rule 15 and the complex world of cross-border data transfers.